Hi guys, welcome to my channel, Life with Ash. Today, in honor of Brain Cancer Awareness Month, I'm going to be speaking about Bobbi's experience with brain cancer. It is quite a heavy topic, so this video may be upsetting, please keep that in mind. But I want it to be informative and give you a deeper insight as to what Bobbi went through and what I went through with Bobbi. So let's talk about firstly leading up to her diagnosis, because it didn't just come out of nowhere. Just after Bobbi turned 2 in May of 2019, we started noticing she was going backwards with her walking. She was pretty up to date with her physical skills. She was climbing, running, jumping, all of that sort of stuff. But after she turned 2, we noticed that her balance was really unsteady. And then we noticed that she would fall over and then have these weird tremors in her leg. So that was happening for a while, and we took her to the doctors, and the doctors said basically it's normal for a child to go backwards sometimes, so just to keep an eye on it, but it was no big deal. She started getting sent home from daycare because she was falling over so regularly. And then eventually she got refused daycare altogether. This was about a span of an entire month. So now we're in probably late September of 2019. So it was sort of a gradual thing. She had a bit of a limp for a while. And then September, she got refused daycare and her walking just came to a stop. We had her tested for seizures because we thought the jolting movement could have been some sort of seizure activity, but that was cleared. And yeah, as far as her development, she was developing pretty normal. I was keeping a close eye on her speech because I thought her speech was a little bit behind. Her comprehension was perfect, but her speech wasn't quite where it should have been for her age. So I was keeping an eye on that side of things, but because of her mum's intellectual disability, I was more hyper aware of keeping an eye on her development for that reason. But yeah, it was just the physical walking that led us to realize that there was something not right. And I kept pushing for her dad to take her to the doctors, and I'm not quite sure whether or not that was happening. But yeah, there was one day I came home from work and Bobbi was screaming. She was absolutely screaming, and I rushed inside and she was laying on the couch and she was all red and just screaming. And I said to Dad, I said, what's going on? Is she okay? And Dad was like, she's been like this all day. And I was like, okay, well, have you taken her temperature? Have you given her any painkillers? Like, what have you done? And he just sort of like done nothing. And I was like, this isn't right. She needs to go to the hospital. Like, she hasn't eaten all day. She hasn't drank all day. She's been screaming all day. She sounds like she's in pain. Like, you need to take her to the hospital. So we took her to the emergency room and she was admitted quite quickly. And she was in there a couple of days. It was quite intense. We had to she had to be sedated to try and put a cannula in for blood tests and things, and it was not working. She fought and fought and fought. So it was quite a traumatic stay at our local hospital, and she ended up being in there for about a week. So I was still working full time. They were running some tests on her, and then during that stay, the pediatrician said, okay, we need to send her up to Wollongong for more testing. There's a possibility that she could have a brain tumor. hearing those words was just, oh my God, it was awful, because in my head it made sense. It was like, okay, well, her motor skills are, you know, it made sense, and I didn't want it to, and it was just like all I could think about. As soon as those words came out of that doctor's mouth, that was all I could think about. So Bobbi was then transferred up to Wollongong, and she was transferred up on the Monday, and I went to work that day. I wasn't going to go to work. I was going to go up with her, but I went to work that day. I don't know why I did, but I was like, I need the money. I need to go to work. And it was my lunch break that day. And, you know, I'd been messaging back and forth when she went under anesthetic for her MRI, and I'd explained to my boss, because I wasn't really doing well that day. I was all over the place, and I said, look, this is what's happening. I'm really distracted today, but, you know, I'm going to do my best to work through it. And I just sat down at a cafe, and my lunch literally arrived the same second as the text message did. And all the text message said, it was from Sayers. It said, she has a brain tumor. And that was the moment that my whole world just shattered. I just burst into tears in the cafe, and I left my lunch there. I just left it there and just literally ran to the office, like running through the main street, bawling my eyes out. I had to go get my keys, and I had to go, and my boss was in the office, and I was just in tears, and because she sort of knew what was happening that day, she just gave me a hug and said, do what you need to do. And then it was, you know, an hour and 20-minute drive from my work to where they were, and it was just the most torturous drive of my life. I was bawling my eyes out, just trying to get up there, and just thinking about that day is just such raw trauma for me. So this was November 2019. So I got to the hospital, and I see Bobbi, and she's absolutely herself, and I'm just looking at her and thinking, how is this real? How is this possible? I went and spoke with the doctors, because obviously I missed the conversation that they had earlier, and her tumor was as large or larger than an adult fist. And I saw the scans, and I don't have a copy of them, and I don't want a copy of them, but you could see this large mass, like way bigger than my fist, but then you could also see bits of tumor all through her brain, everywhere. The doctors were astonished that something so big could be in her head, and her head wasn't in any way out of shape. They had never seen anything like it. And yeah, so they transferred us up to Sydney that night, to Sydney Children's Hospital, and we got to Sydney Children's Hospital quite late. It was probably like 9 o'clock at night. And I remember the neurosurgeon coming to see us. Her name is Erica Jacobson. She was lovely, but we had only just heard the words brain tumor a couple of days ago. It had only just been confirmed, not even 12 hours prior to meeting with this neurosurgeon. It was all happening so quick. There was no time to digest any of it. And the neurosurgeon comes in, and she's like, I need to operate on her ASAP. Like, we're operating first thing tomorrow. So it was like less than 12 hours after her brain tumor was confirmed, they're now talking about cutting open her skull and performing brain surgery. There was no time to think. There is no time to process. It's just go, 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 go. So this neurosurgeon, who is one of the best, is sitting there being like saying to us, I've never seen a brain tumor so big. This is the biggest brain tumor I've ever seen. And she wasn't saying it in a way that was meant to scare us, but obviously it did. It was terrifying to have someone who, okay, this is their job, this isn't just a routine, let's cut it out and move on with life. This is a holy crap, I've never seen anything so big. Not what you want to hear when you find out your child has a brain tumor. She was talking to us for a long time, and it was so hard to comprehend everything because it still hadn't sunken in that she had a brain tumor. And now we've got a neurosurgeon talking neuroscience to us and explaining which parts of the brain the tumor was attached to and how hard it was going to be to get it out. And it was, next morning Bobbi was prepped for surgery, and I just remember taking her into the theatre room, and the nurses gave Dad and I the cap and gown as well. And I just remember not being able to hold it together. There was knowing that the child you love most in this world is about to go into theatre and have their actual skull cut open is just... Knowing your child is about to go into theatre is terrifying anyway, but I could not keep it together. I was literally sobbing, and I was trying to hide it from her because I wanted to be brave for her, and I couldn't keep it together. She was taken away, and I just lost it. I just was an instant mess. So that day was the longest day of my entire life. Bobbi was in surgery for 8 or 9 hours that day. And it was awful. We sat around in that waiting room for hours on end, just pacing up and down the halls. And it was about 9:30 at night that we saw Erica Jacobson, the neurosurgeon, walking down the hallway. And she comes into the waiting room with us, and she sits down, and at first, she let us know in the first breath that Bobbi was doing okay. She was relatively stable, and that's just, you just felt everyone become a little bit more at ease. But then she was like, this is one of the nastiest tumors I've ever seen, and you guys need to prepare yourself for some bad news. At that stage, they didn't know what the tumor was. We didn't know if it was cancerous. We didn't know anything. We just knew that it was a tumor, and it was in all the wrong parts of her brain to be taken out. But she's like, it was very, very nasty looking, and I don't really know what a tumor looks like. Apparently they all look different, but she was like, prepare yourself. I don't think it's going to be good. And then we saw Bobbi for the first time, and oh my God, I was literally brought to my knees. She was unconscious with this big bandage on her head, tubes down her throat, in her nose, hooked up to a million different drips. It was the most intimidating and traumatizing thing I had seen to date. It was horrendous just to see her like that, and it broke me. It just crushed me. All of the nurses and doctors were telling us that while your child is in ICU, that's your time to rest. Your child is in a critical condition, but this is your only time to rest, so make sure you take advantage of it. But it was true. This was the easy part because she was under around-the-clock nurse and doctor care, and we didn't need to be there 24/7. In fact, they wouldn't let us be there 24/7. So they said that there's a chair next to her, and if someone wanted to stay with her, they could. And my younger sister says, put her hand up, and she's like, I will stay with her. And I couldn't bear to be in with her for more than 20 minutes at a time because it was so full on, and I could not handle it. But Says was the one who was like, no, I'll do this. And Says sat by Bobby's side all night. You can't sleep in there. There's no way you could sleep in an ICU room. And that early the next morning, about 4 a.m., Bobby actually flatlined. And Sarah saw it all. Sarah was in the middle of the chaos while they're defibrillating her and trying to bring her back. Like, her heart stopped. She died. She actually died. But they were able to bring her back. But when because Sarah left, like, the doctors told her to get out of there because it was just too much. And she left and, like, came to me and was like, told me what had happened. And we had no idea whether she was dead or alive. Like, we didn't know. The last thing Sarah saw was Bobby's heart stopping and the emergency doctors all rushing to revive her, and she had no idea. But she was brought back and was stabilized again. And a couple of days later, they were able to remove her tubes, and she started to wake up. And she was so swollen. She had black eyes. She was, from all the fluid, she was just, it was so hard to see, but she was waking up slowly, and we basically had to teach her how to do everything again. She had to relearn how to talk and eat and swallow, and it was crazy. And then less than a week later, they were preparing her for surgery number 2. Surgery number 2 was a little bit easier for us because we'd been through it once. At this point, we didn't know what her tumor was, and it wasn't until after surgery number 2 that we found out. Again, lots of time in the waiting room, and about 10 o'clock at night, this surgery was even longer. This surgery was over 10 hours. Erica, the surgeon, comes and sits us down, and she had the results of Bobby's tumor, and she sits us down and she explained what her diagnosis was. And she said, Bobby has a grade 4 ETMR tumor. And she explained what ETMR was. ETMR stands for embryonal tumor with multi-layered rosettes. It is a rare form of brain cancer, and it's one of the most aggressive cancers that exists. It only really affects children from the age of 2 to 7, occasionally seen in young teenagers, but even more rare. There has not been a surviving case of ETMR. Hearing the word stage 4 was the hardest for me because I knew straight away what that meant. I knew stage 4 is the final and worst stage. No one else in my family seemed to understand the diagnosis, and I just remember sitting in the waiting room with my dad, who was smiling and laughing and messaging his friends while Erica's trying to tell us that Bobby's gonna die. And I was so mad because I was like, you need to listen, like, pay attention. He just heard, okay, the surgery went fine, and that's all he listened to. He just shut off and was just on his phone messaging while she's trying to talk to us, and it was so frustrating. And then we went back to, like, Bobby was in ICU. We went and saw her again. She looked the same as she did the first time, unconscious, tubes in. We went back down to Ronald McDonald House, and by that stage we'd met a few people, and people knew that we were, like, Bobby was having surgery that day, and I was gutted. I was so gutted, but my dad was just bouncing. He was over the moon, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that what he didn't listen to I didn't have the heart to burst his bubble. So I just sort of was just, keeping my distance. And yeah, it wasn't until a couple of days later when, the doctor sat us down and explained it again that he actually listened, but he didn't. He was always in denial about it, which is an absolute normal way of coping. My way of coping was to research the shit out of it. I knew everything there was to know about this disease. I'd read every bit of academic information on her cancer that existed, which wasn't much. I'd stay up all night researching, and I knew that this was really bad. We then had a big meeting with the oncology team. Now, we hadn't dealt with oncology yet because we had only been dealing with the neurology department because we didn't know it was cancer yet. So we met with oncology and they laid it out for us, black and white. They said, there is no chance that Bobbi can survive this. What do you want to do? We can try and attack it with treatment, which could make her sicker, but it also could make her feel better and give her that little bit longer. Or we do nothing, you take her home and give her the best life you can. And they said there's no way of knowing whether or not treatment will help or make it worse. But we know that if you take her home and do nothing, she's going to die and it will be very quick. We don't know how painful, but she won't have long. And they said there's no right or wrong choice. And they gave us all the information, all the different treatment options, the side effects, the risks, the benefits, everything. And we had a couple of days to choose, and it was such a hard choice. If I had to do it again, I'd make the same choice. I've seen people go through chemo before. I've seen it. I know how awful chemo is. And I've always said that if I was diagnosed with cancer, I wouldn't go through chemo if there was no light on the other side. And as soon as it wasn't me, I was like, I want to do everything to give her the best chance. But it wasn't about giving her a chance. It was about giving her quality. And that's what I explained to her doctors. I said, all I care about is quality time. Whether it's 2 weeks of quality time or a year of quality time, that's all I care about. What option has the highest chance of giving us quality? And they explained that the way she'd recovered from her surgery, that she was strong enough to go through chemo, and that they think that chemo would be our best chance at quality time. So that's what we did. We chose chemo. And looking back, it was the right choice, but at the time I was so scared. What if I'm making the wrong decision? What if she dies because of chemo? What if the chemo makes her so sick she's got no quality of life? It was such a huge pressure because at the end of the day, it was me making the decision because I was the most educated, and it was up to me. Everyone was looking at me for the right answer, and there was no right answer. So I did my research, and we went through with chemo. We did 6 cycles of chemo. Each cycle was about a month, so it was 6 months of chemotherapy. It was brutal. It was so intense. Obviously, she lost all of her hair. She lost her appetite. She wasn't eating. She was vomiting all the time. She was in and out of hospital with fevers. She spent most of her life in hospital. But that was the choice we made. I consciously chose to subject her to have the rest of her life in hospital. That was my choice, and one that, one that I don't regret. I don't regret that, because I made it my life's goal, my number one priority, to make sure that her life in hospital was great, that she would not know the difference between being happy at home and being happy in hospital. And I did everything I can to bring happiness to her there, whether it was, you know, playing silly games in the hospital and growing and educating her like she would be at home. I did everything I can. I did everything I could. So yeah, that was chemo. Chemo was torture. After chemo, Bobbi had another MRI to see what was happening with the tumor, and chemo had stopped it from growing, but as soon as we stopped chemo, it started growing again, and then we had another choice. Our next choice was, do we put her through radiation to give her a little bit more time? When chemo finished, she was relatively well. And we were put in a position where we had to make another really tough call. I'd done a lot of research on radiation leading up to Bobbi finishing chemo, and all the research I found said that radiation was easier than chemo. It was easier and it was more effective. So I decided we would do it. We came this far, we've done this much, why not do a little bit more? I could not stand the radiologist. He literally gave us so much false hope that me, with all my research and knowledge, I knew was BS, but the rest of my family didn't. He literally said that radiation could get Bobbi another couple of years, and there was no evidence to back that up. Every case of Bobbi's cancer, ETMR, showed that it was next to impossible, especially with the size of her tumor and the fact that surgery couldn't get it all out. It was impossible to surgically remove Bobbi's tumor. And so this guy is saying, you know, we could get her to school, we can do this, we can do that. And there was a part of me that wanted to believe it. And then there was a logical part of me that said, I've done the research. This guy clearly hasn't. He's just giving false hope. I ended up making an official complaint about this doctor, because I just don't think that's fair to tell someone whose child is terminal that, you know, he was promising us the world, and I knew he couldn't deliver it. But, you know, the less educated people in my family, they believed him. And all of a sudden they weren't as cautious. They didn't care as much because, you know, she had years now. But she didn't. She only had 3 or 4 months. Actually, not even. We finished radiation in July, and she didn't make it through October. So Radiation was more difficult for us than it was for Bobbi because it was 5 days a week, every single day. We took Bobbi in, she was put under anesthetic, and there was, half an hour to an hour while she was under for radiation. But she loved it. She actually really enjoyed it. Which is so weird to say. She would get excited when we'd get there, and I'd play this game with her where she had to tell me, like, she had to give me directions on where to go because I would get lost quite a lot. And she knew that every day she would lay in our lap and they'd put the medicine through her central line, which will put her to sleep. And she'd know. She'd be like, Bobbi, go sleep now. And I'd be like, yeah, Bobbi, go sleep. And while they were putting her under, they would play Wiggles songs. They would dance with her. She got to cuddle her toys. And then I literally in my arms, 1 minute she was conscious and the next minute she was fast asleep. And then I had to carefully put her in the bed, and they put this awful, awful, dreadful radiation mask on her head. And it was so hard to see it. I couldn't look at this mask. I couldn't look at it. And then I would go off every day without fail. I would leave the room in tears, go get myself a coffee, and I'd sit and I'd wait and I'd wait and I'd wait for her to be awake. There was one time where she came out of radiation and they forgot to close up her central line. And I went to pick her up and she was covered in blood because they didn't close it off. So she's bleeding out of this line. And there was just blood everywhere. It was so traumatic for both her and me. But it was okay. She didn't lose too much blood. But yeah, that was radiation. And we did that for a month straight. And then after that, she got to come home. And she was good. She was relearning to walk. She was standing up, holding on to things. She was strong. She was happy. She was eating. She was amazing. And we only got to have her home for 3.5 weeks before she just lost all strength in one side. One day she was so excited to use her walker, and the next she was screaming at the thought of even walking. She was sitting with a slump. She was choking on her food. She was going downhill very, very quickly, and I knew it. And I sat my dad aside and I said, we need to get her into palliative care now. And Dad was really hesitant, obviously. He spent her whole diagnosis in denial, and I said, Dad, it's happening. We need to act now. And it was lucky we did when we did, because she went downhill really fast. And no one could tell us how it would end. And I needed to know. Is this going to be like a big event, like a big lights and sirens, a big traumatic event, or is it going to be a peaceful? No one can answer that. No one knows. No one knows. And that's what was so hard for me, because we didn't know when or how it would happen. But we were really fortunate that it was peaceful, and after weeks of just growing more and more tired, she just slipped into a coma and went peacefully a few weeks after that. Brain cancer is the most awful disease I've ever experienced. It is heartbreaking. Brain cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in children. It kills more children than any other cancer. It's so under-researched and underfunded, and it is killing kids every single day. If you've experienced brain cancer through a friend or a relative or yourself, you know just how awful this disease is. We need more awareness, we need more funding, we need more voices for brain cancer, because this disease is so cruel and it's crippling and it destroys lives, it destroys families. I hope this video, while very hard to listen to and watch, I hope it gives you a bit of insight as to what brain cancer is like, and I hope it makes you realize that there are people going through what we went through every day. In Australia, it is estimated that 750 children will be diagnosed with cancer per year. 25% will be diagnosed with a brain cancer. That is an astounding amount of children. 750 children getting diagnosed with cancer, full stop, no matter what kind of cancer it is too many. There is no way to end this video on a positive note. I've tried, I've thought, you can't end a video like this on a positive note, but I will do my best. I hope that by educating you guys with this channel, that we become a voice for children with cancer, that we can raise awareness and help people realize how big of an issue this is. I really appreciate you guys watching this video, even though it is quite a heavy one. It's important. It's important because this is what happened. This is a very, very condensed version of one whole year of a brain cancer battle. It's so important that we speak of it and that we know and that we're aware of what actually happens. I'm really grateful that you guys watched this, and I will have a much lighter video for you next week, but in honor of Brain Cancer Awareness Month, I thought it was really important to speak out about Bobbi's brain cancer journey. And I skipped so much of this story. There is so much that I didn't include, but that was just the brief outline of it. I hope you enjoyed the beautiful photos and videos of Bobbi throughout this, and I hope they made you smile. Please let me know in the comments what you guys would like to see, and tell me what you guys took out of this video. I know it was a really hard one to watch, but if you took something positive out of it, please let me know. Please share in the comments. Thanks again, guys.